To learn Redux, you need to learn three main things. The things are Store, Actions, Reducers. But what are the things? I'm gonna tell you. Store is the place that we put all our global state. For example, is sign in. The store is something like the database of our state. We can take a slice from our store and put it inside any screen or any component. That's the store. Now actions. Actions are plain JavaScript objects. The actions has two main properties. The property number one is the type, and the type is referred to that action. For example, if I want to make a login action, the type is gonna be login. If I want to add to do, the type is gonna be add to do. That's the type. And the payload, it's the data. For example, if I want to create a login action, I need a data like email and password. And we take that data and pass it to our reducers. What are reducers? Reducers are JavaScript functions. Those functions take the data from actions. They take the type and the payload and update the state depend on those things. For example, in our store, is signed in is false. Okay, that's in our store. The state is false. We want to log in a user. So we can create an action called login action. And the type is gonna be login, and the payload is gonna be the email and password. And we take that action and go to reducer. The reducer is a JavaScript function that's responsible to update the state in our store. So it takes the email and password and run this function or fire this function to go to store and update the state there and makes the state is signed in to true, not false, in all the screens of the app, because in the state in our store is the global state in all the app. Let me give you another example. Imagine that we have in our store, for example, 4 to-dos, and I wanna to add one to them. First, I'm gonna create an action called add to-do and give him a payload. The payload is gonna be the title and the body, and we take that action and go to reducer. The reducer take an action, it's something like a metadata, and it takes the type of add to do. The reducer look at the type. The type is add to do, so in that case we're gonna add to do, and the payload is the title and the body. So take that title and the body and add a new to do in our store. So now the state in our store became 5 to dos. If you don't understand me, or if you like those things are difficult to you, don't worry. We're gonna talk about store and actions and reducer in next lessons. So don't worry, the next lesson we're gonna talk about store. The lesson after we're gonna talk about actions, and after we're gonna talk about reducer, and we're gonna type code and update the state. So don't worry if you don't understand anything, or if you think those, or if you think that's hard for you, don't worry. And if you like that video, please hit the like button and share it with your friends or anybody that wants to learn Redux. Thanks for watching. If you have a look at that app, you're gonna notice a disaster. That's an app with home screen and setting screen and profile screen. If you have a look here, you're gonna notice that we are not signed in, okay? The user is not signed in. If you go to settings, you're gonna notice the name of the user is Batman and he is signed in. If you go to profile, you're gonna notice the name of the user is Conan and he is signed in also. Let's try to fix those issues. For example, let's sign in here. So now the user is signed in, it makes sense. And here the settings, the user is signed in, and here in profile, the user is signed in. But there's an issue. Here the name is Conan and here it's Batman. So let's change it to make it Conan. Now our app work perfectly. But what if I press logout here? Now the user is not signed in. But if you look here, you're gonna notice that he's signed in, and here also it is signed in. To be honest, that's an ugly app. Yes, it doesn't make any sense. And that's because we are managing the state locally, not globally. I want, when he is signed in, I want to be signed in home screen, setting screen, and profile screen. And the name of it, he is the same name in settings and profile and everywhere in the app. So to generalize the state in the app, we're gonna create a store. So let's use Redux Store to fix that problem. Let's create a new folder called store. We're gonna store all the states inside that folder. And inside that folder, let's create another file called store.ts. First, let's install those two packages. Let's yarn add Redux. Redux is the package that we use to manage the state globally. And we need to install another package called React Redux. The React Redux package, we're using it to connect our React or React Native app with Redux, because Redux is a global library. We can use Redux with AngularJS, with Vue.js, with React.js, or React Native. So we want to use it with React Native, so we need to install that package, React Redux. Now let's press enter to install them. After installing these two packages, let's make that necessary import. Import combined reducers and create store. Don't worry from that message, create store is deprecated, because these days we're using Redux Toolkit, and Redux recommend us to use Redux Toolkit. And don't worry, in this tutorial we're gonna learn the Redux Toolkit. But you have to learn Redux first, because as I mentioned before, a lot of projects was built using that Redux. So you have to have a knowledge about it. Okay, now let's create our root reducer equals to combine reducer. We use that function to merge all reducers that we create, because to write a clean code, we're gonna separate our reducers into files. So we need to merge them. So we're gonna create a root reducer, and we're gonna use that method combine reducers to merge them together. Okay, and let's export our store. Export const store equals to create store, and give him just the root reducer. Okay, now let's type here our initial state. Const initial state equals to, we need a state of is signed in and the state of username. For example, let's make it Conan. Now he is not signed in and his name is Conan. The last thing we're gonna create in that file is a temp reducer, username or user data equals to a function that return our initial state. Okay, that's a reducer, and don't worry if you don't understand it. It's just a JavaScript function that return our state, and don't worry about it. I'm gonna talk about reducers in next lessons. Okay, so now our last step here in app.tsx. Don't forget to connect your Redux with React Native. So we're gonna use something called provider. We import that provider from React Redux. React Redux, as I have mentioned before, it's the package that's responsible for connecting Redux with React Native or React JS. Okay? In that provider, we have to add the property called store, and we import our store from that file. Okay? From our store file. Now we have done, and we can access all of those global data in all app components and screens. Any screen that you want or any component that you want. Let's start with home screen. Okay, let's go to home screen. Inside, if using is signed in from use state hook, we're gonna use Redux. We're gonna just type is sign in equals to use selector, and use selector is a hook from React Redux, allow us to pick the data from our store here. We want to pick that data is sign in and username or any data that you want, so we need to use that hook. Just create a function state dot, and you just have to copy the reducer name, and the reducer name is user data. Okay, user data dot the data that you want is sign in. Okay, now let's get rid of that, and let's hide that button too, comment it for now, and let's press save. Now let's go to another screen, the settings screen, and let's just copy that code and go to settings screen and just paste it like that. Let's comment those two lines. Let's import our use selector, and let's create another use selector for the username. Username equals to user data username. You have to know an important thing, that property, it should be to equal that property. Okay, and that property should be equal to reducer name. Okay, now let's finally go to profile screen, and let's copy and let's go here. It's just like the settings screen. You can just copy those two lines and paste them here and get rid of those two, and just import use selector and press save. Now if you have a look here in profile, please sign in. Here sign in first, here please sign in, because we are not signing in our store. So what if we make that true? Great, now we are signing in home screen, and in settings screen here we have sign in and the name is Conan, and in profile too we are signed in and the name is Conan. We can change the name, for example Superman. If we press save, you're gonna notice that in profile the name is Superman and settings is Superman. So now our state is global. You can control the state in all your app screens and components. Just create your store and use that hook, use selector, and don't worry about that thing, that red lines, because it's TypeScript issues. I'm gonna fix it soon, but don't worry about it. If you like the video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching. After we have learned how to make our state global in all the app, now we need to change our state. For example, we want to log in. If we press here, there is nothing happen. We cannot log in. We want to change the global state. How to do that? To do that, we need two things. First, an action, and second is reducer. Action, as I have said before, is a JavaScript object that contains the information. We need those information to update our state. And the reducer is a JavaScript function, and this function is responsible for updating the state in our store. So now let's create our action. Inside src, inside store, let's create a file called user actions.ts. Now let's export const login action equals to, we're gonna return an object. This object must contain two things, the type and the payload. The type is the name of the action. For example, if you want to sign in, we're gonna create an action with the type sign in. If we want to create a logout or sign out action, the name or the type of that action is gonna be sign out. Okay, so now let's add a type and make it login, and the payload is gonna be true. Okay, now that's our first action that allow us to log in. Maybe someone wonder and tell me, you lied to me because you have said an action is a JavaScript object, but that's not a JavaScript object, it's a JavaScript function. That is a function. I'm gonna tell you, I didn't lie. This function called action creator, and our action is that object. So now you have to know the difference between action creator and the action. An action in Redux is a plain JavaScript object. That object is the action, and this function is an action creator that return our action. Okay, let's copy that function and create another one, called it logged out, logout action, and this is gonna be, the type is gonna be logout, and the payload is gonna be false. Why we put here the payload true and the payload false? Because in our store here, the initial state is sign in is false. That means he is logged out. When we want him to log in, we're gonna pass that payload and make it true and make that state true. And this state is the global state. This state is the global state. For example, if we make that true, now we have logged in here and here and here. And this name is Superman. We can make it just super. He is super here and here and okay. So now that's our global state, and we want to update it using an action. So we put here true and we put here false to make that is sign in true and false. Okay. The third action is to update the username. So let's copy that function like that and paste it here and rename it with change name action. And the payload is gonna be user name. And let's put it in our params as a string. This string keyword is a TypeScript to refer that username is a string. We can remove it and nothing will happen, but TypeScript is gonna complain about that because we need to put the type of that username. I don't want you to get confused, but don't worry about that keyword, okay? So now we have created our three actions, a login action, a logout action, and change name actions. Now to update our state in store, we need a last thing. We need reducers. And in next lesson, we're gonna create our reducers to take those actions and update the state depend on the payload that we provide. For example, when we want to log in, we're gonna pass a payload with true. When we want to log out, we're gonna pass false. When we want to change the name, we're gonna pass the username, the new username, and it's a string. We're gonna pass it to the reducer because the reducer is a JavaScript function, is responsible to update our state inside that store. Thanks for watching, and I hope you understand me. And if you like that video, please hit the like button. Thanks for watching. Now we want to change that state. So we need to create reducer to change that state, to login and change our name. Okay. So now inside our src, let's create a new file. User reducer.ts inside store, okay? And the reducer is a JavaScript function, okay? Just a JavaScript function. This function takes two params. The first one is state, okay? And the second one is the action. And that action contains the type and payload. That type and that payload. Type, payload. Inside this function, the state is gonna be our initial state. Okay, if we go to store here, let's cut that line and paste it here in reducer. And let's make the state equals to initial state. Okay, let's export that function because we don't want to forget that. Export default this function. And this function, we just return our state, okay? So that's our JavaScript reducer. That's your first reducer. Now we have multiple actions here. We have a login action, logout action, change name action. So we need to create if else or switch cases to handle those cases. I prefer to use switch cases, not if else, because switch is simpler. Okay, let's create a switch. Let's put here the type of that action, and in switch we just add some cases. Case keyword. You have to know that you have to copy the correct type of that action. For example, that's the login. You have to make sure this login string is the same here. Okay, in that case, what are we gonna do? We want to log in. We're gonna return our state, because we need to return our state, because we don't want to lose the other states. And a sign in, we're just gonna make it payload, or we can make it true, whatever you want, but I prefer to make it the payload. We just need to correct that payload here. Okay, now we've created our first case in our reducer. Let's test it. Let's save that, and let's go to our store. Instead of this function that returns the initial state, we're gonna import our reducer. User reducer from user reducer, and just paste it here. Okay, and let's save. Now let's make that button work. So we want to go to home screen, and inside home screen, in this function, we're gonna dispatch that action called login. Okay, so let's import it, and first let's import our dispatch equals to use dispatch. So now let's dispatch that action, the action called login action. Okay, let's paste it here, and don't forget to import it like that from users actions, and don't forget parentheses. So now let's test it. Let's press login. Great, we have successfully logged in. And let's go to profile. We have successfully logged in too, and here we've logged in. Now let's try to log out. Okay, inside our user reducer, just add a new case. Let's copy that, or let's add it manually. Let's just add a new case. Which case that we want? We want a logout case. So let's copy that string and paste it here. When we log out, what are we gonna do? We just are gonna return our state, and a sign in is gonna be false. Or we can make it the payload. The payload is false here. Okay, so you can make it action.payload or false. Let's make it payload better. Now we can sign in. Look, we have sign in, and we can log out. But first we want to go to profile screen and dispatch an action when we press at that button. So let's go to profile screen, and let's import use dispatch. And inside logout, let's dispatch logout action. Let's press save. And now if we want to press logout, look, now we have out. And here we have out, please sign in first, and here too. If we press here, now we've logged in. And here, we have logged in. Now let's try our last reducer. Let's try to change that name. So let's add a new case. What to type here? Yes, change name. You have to make sure that you have copied the correct type. And let's paste it here. And what are we gonna return? We're gonna return a copy of the state or the other state, but we're gonna change that username. Change it to what? We can type here any string that we want. For example, HHH. So now let's go to settings screen, and I'm gonna show you. Here in settings screen, let's do as we have done before. Let's import the dispatch. And let's dispatch that action. Change name action. And let's press save. It complains here because we need to add the name here. And I'm gonna add it, but I want to see you that you can change it from here also. So if you press save, now it's 4 H's. And if you want to change it to any name that you want, just add the payload. That payload. So now here in sign screen, just put the name that you want. For example, John. And let's log in. Let's go here, change. Yes, we have changed it to John. We can change it to A. Let's press save and press change. Yes, great. We have changed it to A. So now that's Redux. To change the state, you just add your action and pass it to the reducer and call your reducer to update the state and store the state inside your store. That's the old Redux and not Redux Toolkit. So if you want to learn more, follow my channel, subscribe to my channel, and hit the like button and wait for great projects that I'm gonna build using Redux. And in next lesson, we're gonna talk about Redux Thunk, Redux Presist, Redux Toolkit, and create a wonderful project. Thanks for watching. Hello guys, in this lesson we're gonna implement some convention and I'm gonna teach you 2 tips and tricks. You should use those tips and tricks will make Redux easy with you. We're gonna make our code cleaner and easy to read and to write also. We talked before that the type name should be the same in the reducer. For example, that's login and that's login. What if we, at any cases, that type is wrong? For example, let's small I, like here. Let's log out and let's try to log in. Look, it doesn't work. We need to make it like the reducer here to work. Look, now it's working. And that action too, change name. For example, for any cases we forgot to add M and try to change the name. It will not get changed because this type should be correct. Now we can change it. To avoid those problems, we should store those strings inside constant. So in convention, in Redux, we just add a file called types.ts and we just export those actions. For example, export const login equals to that action name, login. And just let's do the same with our 3 actions. I mean that logout action, like that, and that change name action, like that. Okay, now let's go to our actions and reducers and replace those strings with our constants, like that. Login. We just imported from that file, the types file. Login, change name, and logout. And just replace those strings with our constants. Okay, let's do the same in the reducer. Let's import them at the top. Let's replace that. And replace that, and replace that too. This approach is the convention and it allows us to debug easily. So you have to do like that. Now let's go to our first trick. If we just go to settings screen, we're gonna notice that if we delete that username and we press dot and we want to get the snippet or the code recommendation, we got nothing. I want the editor suggest me is sign in, that key. To do this, we just go to store, open our store file here, and do the following. Export type root state equals to return type of root reducer. That could allow us to use Typescript to help us using our shortcut or our recommendations from our text editor. Okay, so let's just press save here and go here, and inside that state let's just add our root state like that. Okay, if we press save, now let's remove this is signed in and press dot. Look, we have here our editor recommendation is signed in and username. And here too, if we just try, we got nothing. But we will add our root state type and press dot again. Now great, we have found it. Username and is sign in. That was our second trick. Now our last trick that we're gonna implement is object destruction. We just want to make that code cleaner than this. Those are 2 lines of code. Can we just make them a 1 line of code? Of course we can. We just destruct that user data object like this. Const and open an object equals to use selector. We'll just copy that code until user data. Okay? Because our data, our is signed in and username inside that object. So let's destruct it. Look here, we have here is signed in and username is signed in and username, and now we don't need those 2 lines of code. And press save. Great, we've get rid of 2 lines of code and make it in 1 single line. That allows us to make our code cleaner, isn't it? Let's try. Login. Now it works. And change name, it works too. There's no any problems with our code. I hope those 2 tricks and that convention was easy to you. If you need any support or any help, just feel free to contact with me. Thanks for watching and see you in next lesson. Now we can change our state like we can log in. Okay, but we have here an issue. Look, when I close the app and open it again, what's that? I need to log in again. I press login and I go to change my name. Okay, and I close the app and open it again. Oh my god. Now I'm not logged in and my name is not changed yet. So I want, when I'm logged in and close the app and open it again, I want to still logged in, not logged out. Okay, and that's what are we gonna learn today. We're gonna learn Redux Persist. We have a great library called Redux Persist, and Redux Persist allow me to save my data in the local storage. Okay, so let's use this package yarn add Redux Persist. And we need also React Native async storage. React Native we need to install that package. On app. And finally, let's install our bots for iOS. cd iOS. This step is optional if you are using Android, okay? Now let's just copy that import and go to our store file and paste it here. And let's call it storage. And let's run our app. And we need also those 2 necessary imports. Import from Redux Persist. We're gonna import Persist Reducer and Persist Store. Okay, let's create an object called Persist config. That's the metadata or the data that we want to store. Okay, the key is gonna be the root because we want to store all the data. I mean all the state, whatever he's logged in and his name too. Okay, and storage is gonna be our storage from async storage. But since we are using ES6, we can delete that. Okay? Because the key equals to the value. I mean in the naming. So we can remove it. And here in user reducer, we're just gonna add that persist reducer here and put the user reducer inside it. And before it, we just need to add these configurations. Okay? Now our last step here inside this folder, let's just export const our persister. And this equals to persist store. And just add here the store. Now let's press save. Now we have logged in, okay? We are here logged in. Let's close our app and open it again. Great, we've still logged in here, and here we can change our name, and here in our profile. Let's change our name. For example, let's make it inside settings screen. Let's make it new name. And let's press save. Now we've logged in and our name is new name. Let's close our app and open it again. We're still logged in and my name is new name because we have persisted all the data inside our local storage. So to get rid of those data, we need to remove all the app or the clear local storage. But I want to mention something. This approach here is not completed or it's not the best approach for big apps. Since we're going to create a big app using Redux Toolkit, I prepare an approach better than this because this approach persists all the state. But in big apps, we don't need to store all our state. We just want to store something like is logged in and some settings and so, not all the state, because it's a bad approach. But I have do it like that because you are beginners and I want to make it easier. I want to teach you with the easiest way, but later we're gonna change that approach and add more feature things to allow us to do more and more and just persist some state and leave another, not all the state. If you like that lesson, don't forget the like button and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching. What's Redux Thunk? Redux Thunk is a middleware for the Redux library. But what does that mean? Let me explain to you. If we open src and open our actions, user actions, you'll notice here that our actions are plain JavaScript objects. And this action creator is a normal function. We cannot use asynchronous operations, such as making network requests. For example, to get data from database, to post data to database. We cannot even using an async await functions in that action creator. But what if we want to make an HTTP request, for example, to get some data? For that reason, we need to use Redux Thunk. All what you need, just go to store and let's install that package. Yarn add Redux Thunk and let's install to an Axios library. This library allows us to make HTTP requests. So now let's install them and let's install our bots. This step is optional if you are using Android. So let's cd iOS bot install and let's run our project. Now first let's import our Thunk middleware like that. Import Thunk from Redux Thunk. All what you need to add that small code here in create store function. Let's add apply middleware. We can import that from Redux at top here and just put inside it our Thunk. That's it. Now if we go back to our actions, now we can create an actions with asynchronous operations. For example, let me fetch that API. Here, that API that return a list of box, we're gonna fetch it. So let's copy that URL of it and go. Let's create an action called export const get users box equals function. Inside this function, we're gonna return an async function. Okay, return async. And let's make our API call here. Const data equals to Axios. We are using this Axios in networking because Axios is simpler and easier than fetch. So we are using it. Axios.get, we're gonna make a GET request, and let's put our URL with the endpoint. Let's just add try catch blocks to, if we, in case we have some errors, we can log them. Okay, catch error console.log the error. Okay, let's just format our code. That's it for now. Now we want to connect that get user spot with our reducer. We can make the connection on the type here. That type, login, logout, as I mentioned before. So let's go to types folder and add a new type. This type is gonna be export const get users box equals to get users box. Okay, and let's copy that type and go here and let's dispatch it. We just add a param here called dispatch, and here we're gonna dispatch our action with the type. Like before, the type, we put the type and the payload. Okay, the type is gonna be get users box, and the payload is gonna be the data. Now this action is responsible for getting the data from that API. He's responsible for get the box. Okay, so now let's go to our reducer and add a case. Down here, case get users box. What are we gonna do in that case? We're just gonna return our state, and we just need to add our box array, our box here, users, in our initial state. Okay, users box. It's gonna be an empty array. Okay, user box. Now we're gonna return a copy of state, and the user box is gonna be the payload. That payload is the response that is coming from that endpoint. Okay, let's save it and try it. We're just going to home screen, const users box equals to use selector, state of type root state equals to state dot user data dot user box. Okay, or we can use object destruction. We can remove that user box and just open an object and just add user box. Okay, let's try to log them. Now if we see our terminal, we got an empty array. Why we got an empty array? Because we didn't dispatch our action yet, and in our global state here, our user box are an empty array. But when we dispatch that action is gonna get the book list from that endpoint, and it's gonna send it to that global state of users box. So let's dispatch that action, get users box. So let's, inside our use effect, just dispatch get users box actions. Okay, and let's press save and let's go to our terminal. Oops, undefined. Why we get undefined? Let me check, please. I know why we got undefined. If we open our get users box actions, that action, we forgot to add a wait here. We just add async, but we forgot to add a wait. Okay, when we press save, Now we get our data. We can get list of books. Let me just format or make or beautify that log. You can beautify it using JSON. JSON.stringify, and just put whatever you want to log and add those two parameters, null and true. And let's press save and let's go to our log. Now our log is formatted. Those are our books. Created at that date, the author, that's the cover book of the book, that's the name of the book, and that's the price. So in this lesson we've learned about fetching API and using Redux Thunk. In next lesson we're gonna take those data, the user box, and we're gonna create a flat list here in our home screen and display or render those data here. See you in the next lesson, and thanks for watching. In this lesson we're gonna recap Redux and we're gonna recap what we have learned. So in case you miss something or misunderstand something, I hope this lesson will help you. First, to change your global state, you need to create an action. This function is an action creator and it returns an action. Okay? Any action has a type and payload. The payload here is true and the type is login. When we fire this action, what happens? We just go to the reducer of that action, and inside the reducer we have multiple cases. We just select our case. In that case, it's login. So we're gonna use the login case. What are we gonna do here? We just return a copy from the state. This global state is sign in false and username and user box. We return a copy of it, and we only change what we want here. We here want to change is signed in. That property in this object, in this global state. And we can make it true, we can make it false, we can make it payload. What's the payload value? The payload value here is what you're passing here. I mean true. So in login, the payload is true. Let's go to another action. This action is logout. Look here, the type is logout and the payload is false. So when we dispatch that action, we go here in our reducer and search. That's login? No, it's not that. It's not that. That's change name? No, it's not that. That's logout? Yes, that is. That's the logout. What Redux do in that case? In that case, it return a copy of the state, of the global state, but it only change is signed in property. And it change it depending on the payload. The payload here in the logout case is false. So it make the is sign in false. So you can log out your user. Let's go to another action. We have here an action with the type change name. What are we gonna do in that case? When we dispatch that action take an argument called username and pass it as a payload. Okay, when we go to our reducer do that. And change name, yes, that's he will return a copy of our global state and only change the username. Change it depending on the payload. What is that payload? The payload is coming from an action here, and here it's not a type of data, it's a parameter. I mean it's not true or false or something. It's a parameter we are gonna use when we dispatch that action. So if we go to settings screen, you have to add your argument here. If we delete it, your compiler is gonna complete because it says expected one argument but got 0. So you have to add the name that you want to change. Let's make it test, for example. And that's our app, and let's press change. It's gonna be test. Our last action, get users box, and it's not a normal action because it's not a normal action creator and it doesn't return a plain JavaScript object. It returns an async function because in some cases we need to make asynchronous operations using Redux. So we have to add Redux Thunk as we've learned before in last lesson. What are we do here? We're just taking that endpoint. If we copy that endpoint and open our browser, that's our browser, and just paste it and go, it's not a unprotected endpoint, so we can get the data. Okay, those data are box data. That's an API and we want to fetch it. We're just using an access library with get method to get the data from that API. And when we get that data, we pass this data as a payload here and dispatch an action called get user box. And when we dispatch that action, we just go to our reducer and search. Is that? No. Is that? No. Is that? Yes. Get users box. What are we gonna do here? We just return a copy of the state and update our array of box to the payload. What is that payload? The payload that we got here. It's the data we got from that endpoint. Okay. So that was a quick recap. I hope you've learned the lesson. I hope it's easy to you and not hard. Let's fix the TypeScript of our Redux. Because if you look here, that's a TypeScript issue. So we need to fix it. To fix this, we just need to add the type to that dispatch. And the type of that dispatch is dispatch type. We can import it from Redux. Import dispatch from Redux. And press save. Now we've solved the problem here. Let's go to our user reducer. And we got here two problems, type and payload. I would like to mention again that it's a TypeScript issue and it will not affect your code. So if you don't fix those, don't worry, your code is gonna work well without any problems. But we need to solve them. So let's create a type and let's name it, for example, action type. You can name it whatever you want, okay? That's a TypeScript code, okay? We just take those two properties and define what is the type of each one of them. The type of that type is a string, because if you look at that constant, if we just open it in our types, those are just strings. Change name, logout, get users box. So the type is string. Okay, just we forgot to add equal here. Don't forget to add that equal. And the payload here is Boolean, so we can make it Boolean. Or he is here a string, or he is here an array. So we can make it any. Okay, and let's just copy that action type and add those two dots and just paste it like that. Now we've added TypeScript to our actions and our reducers. We forgot to recap our store. Let's go to our store and recap it quickly. We got here our store. We just import those imports from Redux. That's to apply middleware, to use Thunk, to use asynchronous operations. That's the combined reducer, because we're gonna have multiple reducers. We just have here a user reducer. For example, we can add settings reducers, box reducers. We can use multiple reducers. So combined reducers allow them and merge them together. Okay? That's our user reducers. We just imported those for persisting the state. That's the storage from async storage to store our state in local storage. That's the Redux Thunk. It allows us to create asynchronous operations using Redux. Okay, and we can use it here. That's the persister of Redux persist. And finally, that's the root state type. We just export it to use it with use selector. In next lesson, we're gonna display that list of box, display it in FlatList, and we're gonna render it. So don't miss the next lesson. And after, we're gonna start in Redux Toolkit. So don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button if you see that video is helpful for you. And if you have any problems, just leave a comment, or you can contact me via LinkedIn, Twitter. I left my links in the description. Thanks for watching. In this lesson, we're gonna learn how to render our data inside FlatList. Okay, we got here our data from Redux. That's the user box. We got it from dispatching that action, get user box, and save it inside this state. First, let's clean our code. Let's delete those and delete that line too. Okay, now let's add a component called FlatList, where we are using it to render a list of items. Okay, we just have to add a property called data, and the data is the array of the data. For example, user box. Okay, and we have another property called render item. Inside this render item, we just render what we want. For example, let's create a function here called render item. It takes item and return whatever we want. For example, let's just return a text and add item dot. In our item, we have here created at, author, cover, name of book, price, email. For example, we can use the author. Okay, let's just add render item here and press save. Now we've rendered a list of the authors. We can change it to the price. Now we've rendered the price. I have created a book component. If you see here inside our components, you can get the source code from the link in the description. So now let's use that book component. Instead of render a text, let's render a book. Let's just import it. Don't forget to import it from the path and just add his property. And his property was the author is gonna be item.author. Okay, if you see here, we can get it from here. Image URL, we have here a property called cover URL. It's gonna be item.cover. Look, now we get our cover. Let's add a TypeScript to that item. So it's gonna make it easy for us. So let's add a type called book item equals to that type that we have here. We have author, cover, name of book. That's name of book is a string. Author is also string. Cover is a string too. What we have to price is also string. It's not a number, it's a string. Okay, so now let's add our book item to that function. To add a TypeScript to it, we just need to import list render item from React Native. We can import it from React Native and just add book item like that. Great, isn't it? Now we've handled our TypeScript, but we just need to add something like name of book equals to item dot the name of book. Look here, TypeScript is helping us because it gives us the keys that we put here to use it. Now name of book equals to item dot name of book. Finally, we have the price. Yes, the price. Let's add the price equals to item dot price. Let's press save. Let's just format our code. TypeScript is complaining about that price because it say the price is number, not string, but it's come from the backend as a string. So let's fix it in our book component. In our book component, let's make the price is string. Let's press save. We have another complaint from TypeScript. It says category color is missing. Let's add something like category color equals to that color, Redux color. It's not the best color, but it's a Redux tutorial, so let's use the Redux color. Okay, So now we've rendered our item of box inside a flat list. But we just need something to that flat list, something called key extractor. Because we want to give any item of our flat list, we want to give it a special key, because that help React to know which item it handle with. For example, if we delete an item or update an item, so assign a key to each item is a very important thing. Okay, so now to add a key extractor, let's add this function key extractor. We just take two parameters, the item parameter and index. And since we're not gonna use the item, so let's make it like that. And the key is gonna be index.toString. Let's press save. Now we are done. We have got our data from global state, this user's book from our reducer, from our global state, and we've rendered it inside a flat list. And we've handled the TypeScript things that we face. That was our last lesson in Redux library, and next lesson we're gonna learn Redux Toolkit. So don't forget, subscribe, and don't miss the Redux Toolkit tutorial. Thanks for watching.